Well, hi there. We are on today with Brad Faulkenburg from Bausch Lomb. And Brad, it's delightful to have you with us. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure, Russ. Glad to be here.
First question is an easy one. Um, Bausch and Lomb or Bausch and Lomb? How do I say this, Brad?
Uh, it- Whatever makes you happy, but after 170 plus years, what we'd like to be called is the best. But Bausch and Lomb is typically what people say.
Bausch and Lomb. I got it. Thank you so much for that. So let's dive in. Your title is Executive Director and Head of U.S. Pharmaceutical Sales and Training. What does that mean? What's your job?
I think every day is different. Some days you're the janitor, some days you're the strategy lead, and other days it's a microcosm of all the above. But typical day to day for me is I have the honor of leading our entire U.S. pharmaceutical organization from the sales and the training aspect. So we have roughly 300 to 400 individuals across the U.S. Marketing the Bausch Lomb pharmaceutical RX brand to mostly ophthalmologists and optometrists in the U.S. So, from a day-to-day aspect, it's everything from strategy to development of people to meeting with customers and executing in the field on shareholder value.
Has to be an amazing role because there's just so much dynamic range to that, the way you describe it.
We're blessed with customers. When you're in the ophthalmic space, when you're dealing with eye care specialists, the partnerships are instrumental. Physicians value industry, research, products, innovation, and it's a symbiotic relationship that's all focused on the patient. It's a wonderful specialty.
That's amazing. That is very cool. And that love for the customers, I hear that coming through, and that's very important. There have been a lot of changes in the industry in recent years, and sometimes it seems like success, as I talk to folks, is a bit of a moving target. So how would you describe commercial excellence in today's pharmaceutical landscape?
So I think you're spot on. It's evolving, and it's not a political climate. It's not an industry climate. It's just the world we live in today. I think what we've evolved to at Bausch Lomb is a mantra of being better than we were yesterday. So a growth mindset, just establishing grit, modeling grit in all that we do, and perseverance and collaboration, whether it's with customers or whether it's with our internal stakeholders. Our mindset is to grow and to continue to improve to where we're delivering, ultimately with the focus on the patient. We have a fixation of making sure that our everyday focus in product development and achievements is improving patients. See better, live better is our actual mantra if you were to look at the Bausch & Lomb letter. And when we live that, it's embodied in everything that we do with the focus on the patient, but delivering on our own internal expectations and having a high bar of achievement. So whether you're a sales representative in Tulsa, Oklahoma, or you're the CEO and Brett Saunders himself, it's a matter of being better today than we were yesterday.
That's amazing. That fits with the thing, and I don't remember which productivity expert recommends this, but the idea of trying to, if you are 1% better each day than you were before, you achieve excellence. And it sounds like you subscribe to that philosophy in terms of the journey.
Yes. I like to say oftentimes, never settle for good when great's possible. And I think our culture embodies that.
Nice. And then if you do achieve great, then the next day the job is to do great plus one, right?
There you go. There you go.
Sales models in the industry are shifting. I often hear people talking about it being perhaps a little more difficult to get access to providers, and certainly an increased focus on digital channels. And of course, buyer behavior is very much changing. So I'm curious to know, when you train people to go into the field, how are you adapting training strategies to ensure that they succeed in this new world that we're now all working in?
It's a wonderful question. I really believe, and a lot of my peers in the industry believe, COVID changed the mindset, or it changed the customer access points tremendously. And it opened up and it challenged all of us across the entire globe, to meet the customer where they are. And I think the days of traditionally knocking on doors and walking into the office, yes, it still exists. And that's the end all be all of what we're striving towards. But there are a whole new Pandora's box open wide, and you've got digital media, you've got email channels, you've got webcams, you've got podcasts, you've got everything that's out there, where our customers are seeking information that we now have to manage, play in, and deliver upon. So, for us, the move into AI has been a wonderful transition that Bausch Lomb has invested in heavily over the last year and a half, and equipping our team with the latest and greatest of technologies that are out there to ensure that, to basically ensure that this happens. Nothing will replace face-to-face selling. That is ultimately what everyone in any industry, no matter what your widget is, you strive for. But education is really the focus of all that we do. And that could be email. That could be, social media. It could be all the above. And just making sure, I think our focus is meeting the customer where they are, no matter what that is.
That's profound and wise. If you understand where your customer is and meet them where they are, you'll have success. You did mention AI as potentially a bit of a game changer in the space. Just curious as to your thoughts on that, because I see, honestly, across the industry, a general enthusiasm about adopting AI and a lot of questions about how to do it. So curious to know how you would guide somebody. Let's say someone on your team comes to you and says, I'd like to bring in some AI-driven initiatives. What guidance would you give that person, Brad?
Yeah, I think we made a conscious decision as an organization to be a leader and not a lagger. When you look at what's happening across every industry, AI is here to stay. And if you approach it from the standpoint of how it betters our ability to be productive, how it betters our ability to help patients, especially in our industry, or even educate customers, it's delivered tenfold on our productivity in terms of just being smarter at how we approach doing business. So, a couple of examples would be there's no shortage of information that's out there, and our human brains, I would love to think they have an infinite capacity to absorb and digest and spit things out, but we don't. Machines are a little bit better at that, and tapping in and harnessing the power of data to come back in a compliant way, give us information that helps us help customers. It's been instrumental. I would say two areas of focus that it's helped us the most is efficiency with our field team, especially. Gone are the days of having a rep have to sit down with their data, look at it, think about it, transcribe it, digest it, export it. Machines can do all this for us. And so that they can take and we almost have a chat GPT-like functionality where we can ask it, hey, what are my trends? And the machine spits it back to us. 5 years ago, a rep would have to do that, or a manager would have to do that, or a sales ops group would have to do that. So I think that's one big way to do it. And then the second is just training. The way that we've used artificial intelligence for training has been a bit of a mind bender at first. It's a little bit of a foreign concept to think you're talking to AI or bots or non-human like entities when we're training. But what we found is removing the human aspect of emotion of traditional role playing, for example, where you sit down across from someone. There's that human tendency to see when someone is perhaps struggling or you want to be light on them. You don't want to ask those hard-hitting questions because we naturally want to support our peers and our fellow humans. Well, the machine can balance that. The machine and the AI technology, you can build in an amount of sensitivity, but you also stay focused and fixated on the goal, which is educating. And I think what we found in our training group using AI is it's really unlocked an entire new way to converse and deliver our information for our reps to be able to understand what is it specifically that my accounts or my doctors or my customers are expecting of me. And those two areas have been a big shift for us, like I said, over the last 12 to 18 months, but one that I would encourage anyone to look at.
That's impressive. And yet I often hear that it creates a bit of a safe space for those conversations for the reps as well, in that they can practice more frequently, learn more frequently, et cetera.
It's funny you say that, Russ. We intentionally avoided speaking specifically of using AI for the sales role plays, et cetera. we avoid the word coaching. We avoid the word
Really?
assessments. We avoid the word testing. It is a coaching tool, a practice tool. It is purely just a practice tool that is almost game-like. And what we encourage our teams to do is to have fun with this. And back to what I said earlier, better today than I was yesterday. Of course, there's a scoring element to it, but it's a matter of letting our reps have a safe place they can go any time of day, frankly, and practice and almost have like an arcade-like experience of selling and learning and practicing. That's a safe place. And that's our entire intent of this. We truly do not big brother this. We do not like to, we don't pull reports. We don't look at reports that says, oh, okay, our trends are improving here or there. We use this open, eyes wide open as just a practice tool for our field to have a safe place to go practice at any given hour to improve their skill sets. And I think that launching it that way, that probably increased our buy-in, because no one wants to think, okay, here's, this is almost like a mandatory session of torture. That's not what this is at all. And we intentionally use terminology that lets the reps want to lean into this and understand, okay, my manager's not going to get a report if I did poorly on this exercise or this engagement. This is purely for me. Now, if I want to share it with my manager, I can export a report and send it to him or her. And that's okay to have that functionality, and that's what's great. But ours is purely a practice tool. And I think that's the advice I'd give anybody is create a safe place that is there and available for your team to get better. They're going to run to it.
I love that. And it's interesting, a couple of things that you mentioned. First off, your guidance to have fun with it. I love that because you're going to get more practice repetitions. But I'm also intrigued, Brad, mindset kind of affects everything we do in work. And you have a couple times here with AI especially, I think people have these competing utopian and dystopian visions of what it's going to do. Will it take our jobs? Will it make us better? Will it bring world peace? I don't know that it will bring world peace. I don't know that that is possible. But I notice that you choose to default to the growth mindset in all areas. You go, when you're looking at how this works for a rep, it does the work they don't want to do so they can be their best version of themselves. So I love hearing the way that you're looking at this as basically growth mindset across. Let's help people succeed. Let's help people be their best. And go ahead. Looks like you had a thought, go for it.
I would say if you were to look at the way we're utilizing AI and you put it into a couple of different silos, the one being the physical practice, the actual messaging and selling, that aspect of it, it was probably a little bit easier, frankly, to get our teams on board because they recognize very quickly the first time you use the tool, you really realize how lifelike it is, and you see the value in it. The part that you talked about, this utopian or is the machine going to take my job eventually, et cetera, that was a lot harder on the data analysis side of using AI. What we faced there was, well, I've been in this territory for 15 years. I am the expert. I know my customers. I get what the data may or may not say, but I know better. And what we faced there was that fine line of embracing that, because you want to empower the representatives to absolutely think for themselves, have that entrepreneurial spirit. And we took the approach of this augments that. It's great you have that 15 years of knowledge and account experience. That's going nowhere. What this will help you do, though, is to analyze all the extra trends that are out there that you may or may not have time to do. So we use it as a value add in instances like that, not as a replacement to think for yourself or for the machine to do your job for you. But that's a significant obstacle to overcome, because the skepticism of how can a machine know my customer better than me when I'm in there weekly and I know, what Jimmy thinks, or I know what Patty needs, right? That's the difference that we had to get over.
Love it. And really what you're looking for there then is the win-win. Not does the machine know my customer better than I do or not, but together with the machine, how can I again be as powerful and effective as possible?
At the end of the day, results are results. If your performance, you just trust it. And we started with baby steps of 2-week intervals. Trust what we're saying. Trust the data. Try this. See if it works for you. And over time, you're not going to have 100% buy-in quickly. It takes a while to get there. And it depends where you set the benchmark too. If you say, hey, we want 100% compliance to this. If the machine tells you to do it, you have to go do it. That's a little militaristic for our liking. But hey, if it works for you and that's what you're striving for, go for it. But we chose a middle of the road number, and we said, look, trust the machine more often than not to guide you and direct you, and let's measure the results. And what we found was it does work. So eventually you start to see, okay, maybe you start with half the reps are bought in, or half the field is bought in. And then over time it does grow, and that number starts to grow when people realize, all right, maybe there are some things that I can glean from this and trust.
So there is a definite curve in adoption between your early adopters, your laggards, and everybody in between.
Totally. Yeah, everything in life has the early adopters. You're going to have some that just run to it and embrace it with open arms and hugs. Then you're going to have the resistors that you almost have to pull them there with you. But that's a fine line, and why you have to have good managers, good leaders, good coaches that understand how to get the best out of their people. Because ultimately, like I said earlier, and this is important to us at Bausch Lomb, these are not intended to be job replacements. These are not intended to be gotcha moments where we knew you didn't know what you were doing. The machine caught you, right? That's not what we're doing here. What we're doing here is to make our reps more efficient, our field more efficient. And frankly, at the end of the day, if you do that well, patients get better outcomes and your customers are happier.
Which is perfect. It's what we all want. You're plainly very attuned to the people under your care, the people on your team. Curious to know, when you think about a sales rep coming in, and you're right, so many are very tenured and have been in the industry 15 years. But when you look across that group of people that you have worked with, especially sales team, what's the single most important characteristic that enables a person in that role to succeed? What's the one thing that separates the absolute star from a super competent person who may never become truly exceptional?
We use the word grit. Angela Duckworth's book speaks live to us. And talent, you can assess a lot of different parameters out there: heart, talent, effort, knowledge, acumen, whatever words you want to use. But it ultimately comes down to grit. Of course, you want to hire smart people, bright people, intelligent people. We always strive to do that. But what we like to look for in candidates are people that have proven, not once, but multiple times with examples, that they've overcome, that they've worked something that was difficult into a solution or into a win, right? And that's often not easy to diagnose. People always have good stories. When you interview someone, you're getting their best effort. If they're not showing up with their best effort or their best stories, it's a quick decision. That person's not a fit. But most of the folks come into these interviews rocking and rolling, ready to go. They get their stories rehearsed. So a good leader has to be able to dig in and understand what's fact from fiction. And then more importantly, what's applicable to what we do. Just because you had success in X or Y, it may not be applicable to what we need here. So I think grit is the word I would use that we strive for, but then applicability, or just making sure whether they're coming from a previous industry that might have been, copier sales or uniforms or different things, food services, for instance. We can train them on our products. We can train them on the disease states. What you can't train somebody on is grit. What you can't train somebody on are the innate skill sets that they possess that makes them different. So are they competitive? Are they compliant? And frankly, are they driven? And when you start to look for things like that and you apply it and grit comes to the forefront, that's the woman or man that you want to hire right there. That's who you're looking for. Those are the ones that make a difference.
Hugely impactful. And yeah, I share your belief in the value of grit and the difficulty, as you said, of interviewing for it. My approach, and I'm curious as to your feedback on this, Brad, my approach when I'm talking with people and trying to assess grit is I ask for those stories, but you're right. They all come in with the stories of, here's how I lifted company revenue 17% or whatever.
That's right.
My approach to validating that has always been to ask sort of the second and third level questions to just sort of keep digging on it. But I'm curious to know, what techniques have you found to be useful in eliciting that information and validating those stories?
Russ, that's number one. Keep digging, right? Once you get the initial shine, then you got to understand, okay, is this just wax, or is this actually a really well-equipped and beautiful car here? There's scratches and dents here and there, and you got to look for them. And additional questions that just dig a little bit deeper. And, ones I think that we like to use here are identifying where did the trouble exist and what did you do about it? So it's great that you had the result, but tell me more about what were the obstacles you had to overcome to get there. And if it's weak in that area, I would lean towards, well, maybe you just had luck. You didn't really face a whole lot of things to overcome. And yeah, you had a great win, but what did you really do? So digging deep into the obstacles into the story, I think is a critical component that our leaders dig for and look for, because at that point, that's where the rubber meets the road. And that's where you really, really get to understand, okay, this individual did overcome. What was their role in that obstacle? Did you have a team you worked on? What did you do on that team? What was your role within that team to overcome that for the greater project or the initiative? And so just that second and third layer questions that you allude to, that's it. The leaders that can do that the best typically identify the diamonds from the rocks.
Excellent. Brad, this has been a wonderful conversation. Is there anything else you'd like to share with people? Any parting thoughts, any final little bit of wisdom, Brad?
Yeah, I think when it comes to AI and what we spoke about a few moments ago in the interview, don't shy from it. Don't cower to it. Embrace it, but embrace it at your own pace. Understand what fits best with your organization. Some organizations, like I said, prior, you want to be a leader. Some are going to be in the middle. And if you're a lagger, that's not a problem either. I promise you, eventually, you're going to get there. You have to embrace it at your own pace, though. And to think of what you strategically need within an organization. When you sit down and you do your long-term planning, and define long-term as you may of 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 5 year. But when I look at long-term, I'm thinking at least 3 year plus. When you think of this market or your industry 3 years from now and where we are today versus where we were even 3 years ago, that's how fast things are evolving. And if you don't at least match that pace, 3 years from now are going to be a lot more difficult than 3 years from today because you haven't prepared yourself. And embracing AI is a significant part to that. That is something that I think I would share with anyone that's out there that is just putting their toe in the water and thinking, well, wow, this is expensive, or will my teams really embrace this? Those are secondary problems to the bigger initiative of, if you don't, you're going to be left behind.
Makes great sense. Brad, thank you so much for your time today. I very much enjoyed the conversation.
My pleasure, Russ. Thank you very much for having me.